This is a full-scale war against all the peoples in the West, their culture, their sovereignty, their nations, and their history.
What you need to do is you start to take something through a collapse. Well, then you have World War I. And what do you do in World War I? You wiped out all of the nobility, the ones that had the actual remaining rights and titles to the lands and the assets of the lands. You wiped them out. 47 houses, I think it was, 47 or 49 noble houses eradicated, as well as their men. And everything since then has been just setting up this final, total, and absolute steal of everything, every asset that they could possibly get their hands on.
Clear as crystal, 100%, there is a war on history, culture, and genuine diversity all across the West. Diversity only exists, true diversity, if you maintain cultures and histories and peoples which create those cultures. If you turn everything into a blob, put everything through the blender, the big mixer, you destroy all diversity. You have nothing left.
Traveling to a restrictive country with internet censorship? A VPN is the answer, and surf the internet with no restrictions.
When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes a duty. So said Thomas Jefferson. Go to bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/make-war-history and find out why it is a criminal offence to pay central government or local government taxes in the UK. And let's make war history.
Hello, guys. Sorry I'm late.
No problem.
Seems to be a whole lot of us bald fellows in these dialogues.
It's a sign of, what is it, virility, I believe?
Yeah,
Ivor, that is just fake news. That is just propaganda being
it's actually
by bald-headed men.
No, it's too much testosterone for hair.
No. This is where it's at. This is where it's at.
Yeah, good sense.
Well, look, you know a relevant phenomenon? Apparently, we're at the lowest ever trust in the media, but ironically, a human psychology thing is we still believe what we see in the media when it agrees with our bias. So you can't win.
The 200, what is it? Crypto, you could probably do better. It's 286 known hardwired and cognitive biases. Something's about that. Wow. There's a great chart on them, by the way, and how they break down. And it's like 286, 287 known hard cognitive biases wired into everybody.
Okay.
We're screwed.
Hold on. Hold on a second, boys. I'm going to charge here, right? We're going to get going. Ivor, thank you. Ian, thank you. I'll have the links in the description below. And somebody liked how the other day I did a quick intro to both my guests. So Ian Burlingame, military, great writing, knows lots of stuff. Ivor, not military, engineer, great writing, knows lots of stuff. I'll have the links in the description below. Ivor, you're in Ireland, and I described you to Ian as an Irish patriot and sovereigntist. Good for you. And Ian as an American patriot and English.
Oh, but I've got roots there. I still got family there, English and Scottish. Yeah.
Yes, patriot, sovereigntist, and here I am in the UK, also a patriot and sovereigntist. And I thought it'd be great to bring you both together. I've done a bit of coverage on Ireland, but not for a while. And I think Ireland is further down the path of destruction than the UK.
Very close.
And Keir Starmer is working to catch us up. So it's Wednesday, the 3rd of September. We're recording this at 18:22 UK time. Ivor, let's have you start. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, I think I'm on Neil Oliver tomorrow, and tonight I'm on RCR Radio, I think, New Zealand, and often it's on this topic. And I have to explain to people outside Ireland, rough and tough, Ireland, because of its history of being dominated by the British for, 600-700 years, there's a certain mentality in the country. And people hear about the Irish rebel and the Irish fighter, but that's a minority. And people who left Ireland were very enterprising and very strong, who went off to other countries. So maybe they kind of overrepresented that quality. But the ones who stayed, Ireland is a globalist puppet state, sadly. I hate to say it. So I used to say when I was a corporate manager and a leader in corporate kind of technical arena, I used to joke many, many, many years ago, Ireland is just the biatch of the US pharmaceutical industry. That's all we are. So Ireland had a role in Europe setting prices for pharmaceuticals, so they were on the inside, and we got jobs for the boys from the big corporations, and clear as crystal, we do anything for them, anything at all. And then when the EU, of course, around 30, 40 years ago came along, Ireland's puppeticians bent over backwards to persuade us to become vassal states or a vassal state of the European Union. And when we voted against referenda to give up our sovereignty, Lisbon Treaty and Maastricht, all the politicians did for their overlords in the EU was they just propagandized us with our own tax money for a year or two, and then they ran the referendum again. And they just eventually got a yes. So Ireland has been like this for a long time, and it wasn't too shocking to me that Ireland was the most locked down country in Europe when the COVID nonsense came along. So although we've got some great people, and we probably have a hardcore minority of good people, very forward, we've got this huge kind of bloated middle class and public servant class that will do anything for the narrative. And our national television and our national media are utterly beholden to the narratives, the nonsense. It's astonishing. And even our rival media to the state media, they're just as bad because they're owned by oligarchs who report into the same Davos, yada, yada, yada. And it's a thing to behold. Like, I don't get emotional about it anymore. I know a lot of people get very angry. It's just the way it is. It's really shocking. So yeah, that's Ireland. There was no violence or jackboots during the COVID flu nonsense because people kind of went along with it in such great numbers that they didn't need to bring out the iron fist from the velvet glove. So it wasn't actually very oppressive, even with all the rules and regulations that were clearly insane, because people just went along with it. You couldn't wake people up. So that's kind of summary of Ireland, and that's the problem we have, really. The UK has more of a best of British backbone. They cause more trouble against the madness from the globalist oligarchy, and there's a lot more tension, generally speaking, though a lot of British roll with it too, and only speak quietly off the record about things are crazy, right? But Ireland particularly has this problem, I think.
Okay.
So I was raised to believe from the time I was just conscious till a DNA test in my 50s that I was Irish, that my father was Irish. Turns out my father is English. But he was in Northern Ireland for a while. So I have a bit of a soft spot for the Irish, shall we say. And I very much understand what you're saying. The thing that Ireland does have going for it is the sons of the diaspora. And boy, they've acquitted themselves well in history. Like in America, in the United States, 4/5 of all congressional medals of honor, 3,000 or so, that have been issued have gone to either Scots or Irish or Scots-Irish. I think it's about 2/3 now, but it was about 4/5 here just before the GWAT.
Wow.
So we've also had something like 6 of the last 8 presidents have been Irish. Yeah. So, and the big political families and big power families. And so, if I wouldn't be for writing Ireland off just yet. There's some folks in the diaspora that really do care about Ireland. Ireland is the homeland of their peoples. I think that one of the things that we have to get over and figure out how to deal with, and I'm having some conversations with some people there in Ireland, is we need to realize that all of us in the British Isles come from the same civilization. And like it or not, it's the English civilization. It goes back 1,200 years or so. And we've been fighting that out and contesting it out like a family does. But we're all one civilization.
Now, Ian, before you go there, I just want to add something, right? So I want to take care of any reactivity that Ivor may have about being Irish called English, right? My wife is Scottish, by the way, right?
Yeah.
And she doesn't want to be called English, right? No, I'm sorry.
But you're not.
My concern as a Pakistani was that our children would support the right cricket team because they're going to piss off both their mum and their dad if they support the wrong cricket team, right? But there's something larger that Ian's talking about, which we'll come to in a moment. But one of the things that I want to say as a Pakistani and as a Muslim, and as an immigrant, I came here when I was 5, is the regard that I think Irish people are held in all over the world. And I think that's due to the fact that it wasn't a colonizing nation, it was colonized. So it doesn't have that sort of brutish, bullish arrogance that has pervaded. It's part and parcel of British imperial culture. Also that Ireland for many, many years was neutral. And a homogenous Roman Catholic, beautiful country that I haven't visited enough times with a fine tradition of art and music. It's just gorgeous. By the way, I grew up in northwest London with a very, very large expat Irish community. So very familiar with the Irish people and what they represent. The tragedy is, with a population of about 8 million, no one really cares. It's not like Germany or France, or it's not making the noise that Hungary is making. It's not like Britain. It's a tiny, important nation, and it's important because it's really clear what the globalists are doing in order to destroy culture, destroy tradition, destroy a people, destroy families, destroy religion by the importation of large numbers of mostly Muslim men. And I've said this many times, I wouldn't want Pakistan's population in a matter of years to increase by 20% of non-Muslims. It's how you destroy a culture.
Of course.
The globalists are using population movement as a means as a means of control, as a weapon. And
yep.
So I'm with you, Ivor. I've done quite a few videos, as I hope you know, through our mutual contact at Ryland Media, with many people in the freedom movement in Ireland. So power to your elbow.
Well, the beauty is you're completely free to say anything you want, because to be honest, at this stage particularly, I've no dog in the fight anymore. It sounds terrible, but I've been so let down by my countrymen and women, as I briefly described. The loyalty at this stage, my only loyalty is to try and preserve our history and our culture. That's mainly what I bang on about, for the reasons you said. Clear as crystal, 100%, there is a war on history, culture, and genuine diversity all across the West. So diversity, and I often point this out, don't need to you guys, diversity only exists, true diversity, if you maintain cultures and histories and peoples which create those cultures. If you turn everything into a blob, put everything through the blender, the big mixer, you destroy all diversity. You have nothing left, because all of the individual nations, histories, cultures, they're gone. They're just like, the pastiche of a Patrick's Day parade in some other country, where all they know is it's green and leprechauns. It's a distant memory. So I'm still interested in trying to preserve what Ireland is, or what Irishness is, to a point. But yeah, you won't say anything to offend me about the English or part of this country, or we're all together. We're all Anglo-Saxon in a sense. Irish is a bit different. But I agree with what you were saying there. This is a full-scale war against all the peoples in the West, their culture, their sovereignty, their nations, and their history. It's a full-scale war. So we're all together in this, genuinely. Unlike COVID, when we were supposedly all together in this. We are all together in this, and that's where a lot of unity is coming from. And indeed, the Irish diaspora in the US and elsewhere, a lot of those guys are doing pretty well, but maybe it's because they're from a background where they did leave, and they strived, and they prevailed in challenging environments, and now they're that bit stronger and more aware of what's important. Sadly, though, in the last 50 years particularly, we've grown a puppetition class, a massive bloated public service, an absolutely out of touch kind of state media and general media. We've grown a monster without realizing it. And now that the globalists are flexing their muscle and essentially imposing the Kalergi plan properly, it's been a century, so it was about time. Now they're reaping this harvest of idiocy that we've allowed to occupy the positions of control in our country. I mean, that's what's happening. It's hard to watch.
Ian?
Yeah, so back to something that you said, Rich. When the quote-unquote British Empire, which I hate the term British, that's a psyop to deny the English society and civilization and the independent cultures of the Welsh and the Scots and the Irish, etc. But as the empire was building out, and even all the way up through World War II, and even in some of the SAS operations and all that later, the Irish are still well represented in military officers, even generals, and as senior enlisted men. So there is still, that fighting spirit that was still in the Isles. Now, maybe it didn't fight for Ireland directly, and all of that's been greatly diminished since, 1922 or so, but the 1920s, and a lot of good men that stayed, fought and died in that whole conflict all the way up into the Troubles. But there is still a warrior culture there. There is still a warrior ethos. It's not buried too far. And the crazy thing is, we find all around the world throughout history is when young men have nothing else to lose, if they're shaped and guided right, they'll fight. And their ability to fight comes pretty quick if they're backed and supported the right ways. And I'm not calling for that, but unfortunately at this point, history shows again and again and again, in the unconventional warfare background I come from, that pretty much your only choice is to fight. Now you got to do it legally, and you got to do it through the courts. You got to try and reset constitutionality, and you got to undo all the legal, forgive my term, but legal fuckery that's been going on, and you got to highlight all the people that have been doing things that are not in accordance with the, the Irish Republic Constitution, etc. And you do have one, and it does give a lot of rights and privileges to the Irish, to the native-born sons and daughters of Ireland. You got to do all those things. That's what's happening here in the United States right now under this administration. Immense amount of stuff of resetting the judiciary and the courts and all of those things, and it's succeeding. And then we're taking World War III off the table so that we're not having to worry about that. But there's still a fight coming, because the very people that are executing the final, to your point, final stages of their century-long plan, they're not going to go down without a bloody fight.
Yeah.
So the beautiful thing for Ireland is, and it's the same with the British Isles writ large. I hate to even call them British, but the Isles, is that, boy, you've got a large diaspora that if the banners were ever raised, a lot of people would rally.
Yeah, and I think to switch to a more positive thing, I mean, recently there was a referendum, and it was to remove the woman's importance in the family in our constitution. Now, all of the media, all the NGOs and all the politicians screamed at the people in Ireland for months, we had to vote yes, obviously. And they tried to say it was outdated and kind of anti-women. But what was in the Constitution could have been written yesterday. It was that fresh.
Yeah.
And it didn't say that women couldn't go out and work, or even shouldn't go out and work.
Yeah.
It said very carefully that a family should not suffer. The woman's role in the home and with the children is very important. We treasure it.
Yeah.
So a mother should not have to, through penury or through desperation, be forced to go and work.
Yeah.
Like a kid forced to go up a chimney.
Yeah.
And
we're the women in the old looms and the old factories. Yeah.
All it said was that. But all the NGOs, the government, and all the media were saying, oh, no, this is outdated. And what it was clearly intended was to open the door to the trans stuff, the weird sex stuff, what was the different weird couplings.
Ivor, what was the proposed change?
The change was to take out, there were two, and it's 2 years ago I presented it, I can't remember exactly, but there were two clauses, and the key one was to remove the woman, the family, and all that male-female family and Irish family-centric wording, and replace it with partners and other important individuals, or, important others. And we saw it as two key things: to further open the door to all the sex stuff, which is a globalist campaign for decades, funded. And the second thing was for mass migration, because the Attorney General, I think, of Ireland, the Attorney General, pointed out the danger that mass migration people could now more easily bring in all their families as well, because the Constitution wasn't ideal for that. So it was complete malice, completely malignant, but the people voted it no, in the biggest no vote in the history of referenda in Ireland. So that was a great sign. Now,
wonderful.
Most of those no voters wouldn't understand what we know, how malign it was, but they smelled a rat. So that was a good thing. But the problem, the tough guys of the Troubles in the North, you mentioned them in. The irony is that Sinn Féin, the Republican Party, the party of the tough guys back in the 70s and 80s, really nasty stuff went on. Where are they gone? People keep asking me, where are the men of these Troubles, Well, the party of them now is literally in bed with Pharma through their leader, and are absolute globalists, that party, Sinn Féin. When the government locked us down, Sinn Féin were in opposition, the Republican Party of the rebels. They fought with the government to lock us down harder.
Yeah, well, they're a fake thing from the very beginning. They were a Trojan horse from the day
Yeah.
Sinn Féin. I did counterterrorism work in direct action. I was a targeting guy. This pattern of Sinn Féin out of the IRA has been repeated all over the world, MNLF and MILF in the Philippines, etc. What do? An intelligence organization spawns a terrorist, group and element. They do that for a few years, and then a moderate group splinters off in direct refutation to, never mind, it's the same founders. And they said about the political solution, and every time they're trying to gain political support, if there's any pushback, well, terrorism flares up somewhere miraculously, right? It's an old pattern. It's a Trojan horse. All of that, IRA, Sinn Féin, all of it was most likely an MI6 operation.
Yeah, pretty much.
Straight up. Specifically to put this government in place, specifically to undermine the Irish, sell the Irish down the river, etc.
And I only realized quite recently, it hit me, all of the American involvement with the peace process. I used to be curious as a corporate guy, why are they so hell-bent on getting the peace process done? And I thought it was just because there was a bit of green jersey kudos. I mean, all the American involvement and the state involvement. And I wonder more now, when you know where you're going with the countries in Europe, and you know that a country that has a paramilitary element and a genuine kind of tough guy element and struggle going on, you're not going to sell them trans sex and mass migration. They'll take your head off. So it would have been strategically important to do exactly what you said, to calm all that down and get ready for a few decades of super softening up the population, to turn them into the likes of people who will swallow the woke nonsense of the recent years.
Completely agree. There was another piece to that. The other piece is they needed to set up Ireland as a money laundering center for corporations, a massive money laundering center.
Yeah.
Right? The spider's web. Right?
Yeah.
Say more about that, please. Because you mentioned that in the previous video, because I was like, why is there all this attention on Ireland? It's tiny.
There's trillions and trillions of dollars, right, of corporate wealth reflected in the Irish banks, of corporations who are parking their overseas earnings in Irish banks. They don't have to declare that and pay tax here in the US. They pay a modest tax there in Ireland if they take the funds out of the banks. What does it do? It creates this entire massive money laundering system where vast amounts of illicit monies can be masqueraded and hidden, moved through the banks, all under the appearance of the corporate activities. So, and now they need to collapse everything, collapse Ireland so they can confiscate the trillions of dollars, because Europe is done, Europe is bankrupted. And so they need to, confiscate the assets in those banks just to keep this, to your point, Ivor, this bloated system going.
Yeah.
It's a violent parasite, but really that's what it was. Ireland's been a huge money laundering center for, since we got all this set up in the 80s.
I worked with a major corporation, and a financial controller there just kind of told me the 12% corporate tax rate that Ireland has is a joke. The French and all complain about the 12%. In reality, he said, we probably pay 1%. And the directors all named out of an office in Bermuda. Yeah. Even though it's a huge corporation. Yeah. Like, it's just like, it's comical. But you know what? I put up something on YouTube yesterday, and it's gone bazooka views. It's a guy at the UN, Cass, talking about UNESCO and the UN and how the whole thing is a world government scam. But I downloaded this book. It's a summary of Tragedy and Hope from Quigley, 1966, that was banned. But this summary, and I'll send the link, Rich, after, and you can maybe put it with this podcast. A guy, Plummer, has written a summary of the enormous tome, Tragedy of Hope, and he's taken out all the key pieces that were revealed that got it banned, like from Woodrow Wilson and the bankers and the creation of the Fed, right through. And I read half of it this afternoon in an hour, and it's astonishing, and it's free download. So it's funny how for the last century, it all goes back to the bank. The big banking cabals.
Yes. Well, let me just say something about that. So I bought this book very recently. I was just going to go on holiday. I thought it'd be holiday reading. So I'm like, I'm going to carry that on the beach to read, right? Right. And Carol Quigley, Tragedy and Hope, it's original. And I first heard about it from reading John Taylor Gatto, whom I absolutely love. And it was an inspiration for me to never send my kids to school. So my kids were home educated, and they're now 21 and 18, I'm very proud to say. But what you were saying just now, Ivor, I will link to that. I was looking through your thread earlier, and I saw the this, and I'm interested in that because if that can condense the ideas in this very, very important book, and people can wake up to that underneath it all, as Ian and I have covered in a couple of videos previously, is the City of London.
Yeah.
It's the financialist kill chain.
Yeah.
By the late 1800s, the realization was that the peoples of the Isles did not have the population. Sorry, I got a cat battling me for the screen here in the back. My daughter's cat. But by the late 1800s, there was a realization that the manpower and the energy within the Isles were not sufficient enough to continue to expand the empire, and that it was going to come down to a collapse, that most of the manpower being expended in wars. What do you need to do is you start to take something through a collapse? Well, then you have World War I. And what do you do in World War I? You wiped out all of the nobility, the ones that had the actual remaining rights and titles to the lands and the assets of the lands. You wiped them out. 47 houses, I think it was, 47 or 49 noble houses eradicated, as well as their men, right? And everything since then has been just setting up this final, total, and absolute steal of everything, every asset that they could possibly get their hands on. And right now, they're trying to take us all through collapse. And they want it to collapse. They need it to collapse so that then they can come in and exercise the rights to the titles which they've acquired over the last several centuries. But there's one fundamental principle that they have to have, contract law. And as a former business guy, contract law. They have to take physical possession, and they have to be able to maintain physical possession for the contract to be valid. So what do? You got to kill off the native sons, specifically the young men who can stand and fight. You want to exercise the title? Great, come and fight me for it, right? So you got to kill them off. You got to demoralize them and kill them off. And then you have to flood the lands with your trash, because you don't care if your trash gets killed. You'll just wait to exercise the title later, right? But if your trash can take it and hold it, all the better. So all of, these folks think they've been going back to Venice, right? This financial kill chain. It runs in about, depending on the host that the parasite is living in, it's 200-300 year cycle. In this case, it's about a 400-year cycle, because it started with Peace of Westphalia in continental Europe and the Inglorious Revolution in what would become the United Kingdom. We're at the end of it. They have a problem. They have the same problem, however, that they did with Russia, Soviet Russia, and Maoist China. They expected both of those to just collapse, and they slaughtered off, probably between the two of them, somewhere close to 200 million of their own people.
Yeah.
And so the financialists who had went in and bought up all these titles and all these rights, et cetera, in the various wars and conflicts and civil wars. Sorry, guys, my cat. Anyways, daughter's cat is like, this is my hangout.
She's providing welcome,
right?
Relief.
Yeah, entertainment. She's a sweetheart. The expectation was that they were going to be able to go in with the Russian Revolution and exercise rights and titles that they'd bought up from impoverished nobility. It didn't work out. The factions between Britain and Germany, the Germans said, well, no, we're not going to let you do that, Britain. So they sent the Marxists in there, Lenin, Trotsky, etc. And they won.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Well, okay, now you can't exercise the titles, from the revolution, etc. And so you're going to have to wait until this communism thing burns itself out, because it does. It always does. It can't sustain. So that was an 80-year thing. Well, they did the same thing through the Opium Wars and civil wars in China. And well, same thing. Germans were like, man, we're not going to let you take that one either. So they set, and factions within us as well. In fact, Fabians and all the others. So there's always factionality. So it's not just one country, but they sent the Marxists, supported the Marxists over Chiang Kai-shek and the Republicans in China. And so they had to wait them out. Okay. Soviet Empire finally collapses 80 some odd years on, or 70 some odd years on. What they do, they rushed in to buy up even more and exercise their titles. Well, they had a problem. The old Russia is a civilization. And they were able to come together around that civilization and stand and fight. And they elevated a guy named Putin, who's pretty damn good, and he's uncorruptible. And he loves his people. He loves his civilization. Okay, well, it worked. It was pretty iffy in the first 6, 7 years, maybe 10 years. And boy, we threw everything at him. But we just tried the same with China 10 years after that, when communism basically finally ended there, fully. Right, at every level. And we tried the same there. Well, the Chinese, though, they're a 4,500-year-old civilization. And they're like, no, you're not doing that to us, and you're not doing it to us again, right? We stopped you the last 2 times, going back over, a century and a half. So we're going to do Russia's model. We're going to elevate a Putin-like figure, and they elevated Xi. And it's working.
Yeah.
The English, it's working. The Persians did it. Yeah, go ahead.
Just so we hold that thought, the Persians, but it just shows you how important it is to destroy sovereignty, nationality, culture,
civilization. Civilization. Yes. Civilization in these cases. The Russians are 140 some odd ethnicities. The Chinese are over 1,000. Okay. This is why I get back to what I said about the Irish and us. Have all got to realize we are English civilization. There's no English ethnicity. Doesn't exist. Right?
Yeah.
English civilization was set forth in the Dooms of Alfred, started by his grandfather Ecgbert, but really set forward by Alfred in the Dooms of Alfred, which was the common law, common to the king, the princes, and the people. And he hung judges that didn't adhere to that, 40 some of them. And he translated everything into English. And every court case that was ever tried anywhere in England, in Wessex, and then later England under his grandson, had to be done in English. And he removed judges, hung judges, etc., that were abusing their power, not doing things in English, etc. Point being, he set forward this English civilization that we in the Isles, and then Americans and Canadians and Australians and New Zealanders and South Africans, etc., have all been a part of ever since. If we can remember that we are a civilizational people and adhere to that and come together around that, and like a dysfunctional family, set aside our personal family squabbles right now, we'll get back to those. Right? We've been doing those for over 1,000 years. We can get back that shit. It's going to be there. Right? But right now, we have to all come together as a civilizational people and do what the Russians did to prevent this collapse and abandonment, step 7 of the kill chain, what the Chinese did, what the Persians did in the 1970s. And then we couped their ass. And so then they counter-couped us. Although we think the counter-coup, the Islamic counter-coup, may have actually been an MI6 operation to Arabize the Persians and try and diminish them that way. And it didn't work. It didn't work. But point being is this. We're not done yet. We're not neck bowed, ready to take the axe or the knee. We're not quite there yet. I think that's some years off. Ireland's closest, of course, right?
Well, yeah. Now, I came out with quite a lot of negative stuff there. It's just because I'm a brutal realist. And I have to acknowledge the reality that I described. However, in my public talks across the UK, I've been there several seasons, I always have a message of hope. I believe it's all on the razor's edge, and it's all to play for, the struggle you're referring to.
It's all in.
I truly do. But we're going to need awareness to grow to a larger minority than currently is generally aware. And our headwinds are challenging, i.e. the ownership of the oligarchs of the media and the puppeticians. And there's a quote I often share: the advantage that evil people have is that they'll all work together. Whereas, to your point, Ian, our problem is we need to all come together. And there's a headwind again there. Because the system is set up now that if you even, speak or talk to, the English or the Irish people or these people, you'll get called a racist. Of course.
Yeah.
You're not, they're trying to make it so you don't even have the language, or you can't even speak the idea of we are a community, because then you're a racist.
Wow.
You need to take half of Africa in and flood your country and interbreed. And you're talking about you guys sticking together. So it's challenging. But I think one really good thing is, in Ireland, there's a growing vocal community who have finally done what I said a couple of years ago must happen. You must grow a pair and no longer be scared of being called racist, being called anti-vaccine, being called anti-anything. don't be scared of the slurs. Speak your mind openly, fairly, and with references, not chemtrails from Facebook posts you saw. That's a disaster. Or anything like it that's not locked down, proven in historical or scientific, locked down, documented facts. I always tell people that. Stick to what we know we can back up. And speak your mind. And if people do that, I agree totally. It's all to play for. If more people speak their mind, it'll become unmanageable from the, what did Michael Young call it? He said, our problem is a meta tribe of oligarchs and oligarchies. And many of them are frenemies. You mentioned Fabians. There's the British. There's the American deep state. You know, there's the banking, overarching head of the snake people. They're all like a meta tribe. And that's what we're up against. You know something, Alex Craner, and I'm going to ask you about this, Ian. You would... Alex Craner stunned me when I was in Dubai, I think, or was it Istanbul at a Maverick conference. I interviewed him. And Alex Craner in Monaco, he's Croatian originally. He was in the war there in Yugoslavia when he was a kid. But he told me all about the history of Russia and how Russia supported America against the British and that was pivotal. And Russia has often been our ally. And now they've switched it to the lie narrative that Russia is the enemy. But he said when Russia fell, the Russian people called it the rule of the seven bankers after the Soviet Union fell. And Putin came in, apparently, and told the seven, you can keep your stolen money, but you're getting out of politics. And three of them fought him, and then they had to run off to Israel when he beat them. And a fourth, who was Rothschild's man in Russia, fought him harder and got 9 years in jail. And the other three Alex didn't mention. But basically, he kicked out the bankers. It's always the bankers, isn't it?
So, give me a second. So, I want to go back to the factionality thing for a minute, okay? I wrote a book called The Eternal War. It's a quick little primer, 100 pages or so. And there are two primary hereditary classes, resentfuls and responsibles. And to your point, the responsibles are always so busy getting things done and fighting this eternal war of the resentfuls that they rarely ever come together and really organize, really coordinate, really, right? Because it's a Herculean effort, and it's going to draw the ire of, there is no surer way to get the two major resentfuls factions, which are basically the Nazis and communists, what we call them now, whatever the hell they were called in the past, but there's this mind type, right? Neurological wiring, ideological wiring. Nothing gets those two enemies to collaborate and their sub-factions to collaborate faster than three responsibles coming together and just having a cocktail party, right?
Yes.
So I think it's a good book for most people to read. It's very quick. I break down 13 doctrinal lines. I took Saul Alinsky's guidebook because that's the playbook that they're all playing off of, and I did the refutation of that on the responsible side. So that's one thing. The factionality piece really only breaks down ultimately at these final culmination phases into three factions. We're now coming up to the end of the Marxist faction. That's getting done because the truth of the matter is they're always used as puppets by the Nazi faction, by and I don't want to say fascists because we've had fascism increasingly since the 1940s. You just look at the regulators, government, and corporations and the banks. They're all working together. They have a revolving door.
Yeah.
That's by definition Benito Mussolini's fascism. And oh, by the way, we also got to remember, fascism was Italian, not German. The Germans had to come, and they were trying to get the Italians to join the Axis powers, and they needed an economic system to work because National Socialism didn't. And so they borrowed fascism. So when we say fascism, everyone thinks Nazis. It's like, no, that's two totally separate things. They adopted it later on to make their system work. But fascism, 1932 speech, Benito Mussolini, everybody should read it because, boy, you'll understand government better, right? So we've had fascism since, the 1940s, increasingly, really taking off the 1950s. All right, back to Russia. Yes, Russia helped twice. Catherine the Great made sure that foreign powers didn't get involved in the kerfluffle, the little mini civil war between the colonials and the crown, but it wasn't really the crown because George was non compos mentis. If you look at the grievances and the times that we had the worst reactions to, responses from the crown, it's when he was non compos mentis. That means others in the court were the ones that were forcing this issue. But Catherine the Great did that, and then Alexander II did it again in the War of 1812, I think, or in that time frame. And then again, they helped during the Civil War to, make sure and I don't remember exactly how, but they participated there to make sure other powers didn't use the American Civil War as an opportunity to do a land grab in the North American continent. And the way the Russians did it was their Navy. They had a rather good Navy at the time, right? So yeah, we wouldn't be the United States of America. We'd never have gained independence. I think we're only gaining independence now, literally. And that's what we're fighting out. So now back to Putin. Putin didn't do it himself. He's one man. He would have been killed. Right? He would have been killed early on.
Yeah. No, I often wondered. He obviously had a whole network that conspired in a good way, I guess, to back each other up.
Correct. So the Responsibles Russian factions, Responsibles factions in other places helped Putin. But what really helped Putin was coming out of the Soviet era, coming out of this total mind-fucking collapse. The Russians just wanted an identity that didn't get them killed, that didn't get them turned into, the state police and sent off to a gulag, or, have their rations cut. It's the same thing with the Chinese. I had this conversation when I was an analyst in investment banking in China back in the early 2000s. And there was, wealthy Chinese and even some government people, high-ranking government people and high-ranking corporate people, and they were concerned with what was happening in China, that there was all this influx of all these foreigners, money people, who were taking all these assets. The flows of capital were all going right back out, trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, and there was all kinds of concern. And there was a lot of concern around the Hu family, Hu Jintao, who was the premier at the time. And one night we were driving between two events, and I said, I wouldn't worry about it too much, because every 50 to 80 years after an invasion, so the fall of a previous dynasty, the new dynasty emerges more Chinese than any dynasty before. Why? Because once they get all of the power structures and balances and everything worked out, when you have all the money, you can buy anything you want with. What is there? Culture, civilization, identity, who and what you are. And it's exactly what's happening. It's why Xi's still alive. It's why Xi's been having these successes, and he's having extraordinary successes, rooting out corruption. And he stopped the flow of trillions of dollars back out into the spider's web, right? You know that term, the British banking system? He pretty much stopped the China hustle. That's a great documentary everybody should watch. So how did they do this? They did it by going back to their civilization, their shared civilization that was a thing that supersedes government structures, supersedes banks, supersedes economics. It goes back unbroken 1,000 years in the Russians' case, 1,100 years. It goes back 4,500 years with the Chinese. Not exactly fully, but 2,000 something is an unbroken, right? They fell back on that. And what happened? All of the different ethnic groups, including the Uyghurs, all came in until we tried to use the Uyghurs for Islamic terrorism in China. That's what's going on with the Uyghurs, right? Just like we used the Chechens in Russia to do 2 Chechen wars to try and use Islamic terrorism against the Russians. The problem is, down underneath, the Uyghurs still consider themselves Chinese civilizational peoples more than they consider themselves Muslim, just the same as the Chechens and the Dagestanis, with some exceptions, of course, but you always got hotheads, right? So the point being is that these 2 great ancient peoples were able to survive this very state that we're in. And not too terribly long ago, 20 some odd years ago, 30-ish roughly years ago, started with the Russians, and 20 some odd years ago with the Chinese, and they've survived it. How? Well, going back to their civilization and binding people together through the civilization. But guess what? We, in and out of those islands, are a civilization that goes back to one man, Alfred the Great, and his son, William the Confessor, and his grandson, Athelstan. We all speak this shared language. We all share the same stories. We all come from the shared histories. They're unique, because like Russia, we have our own ethnic groups, and we got our own unique cultures, and even on Ireland, you've got unique cultures based off where you are in Ireland, in that tiny little place. Same with Scotland, right? So there has been a psyop against the English civilization and its constituent members as a people that goes back before the English Civil War, because they were laying the conditions for the English Civil War. Who funded Cromwell, Amsterdam and Venice, right? Who funded the Round Hats? right? Or roundheads, right? So, point being is that we're all still caught up in this psyop that they spend. If they, I did an article in here this morning. If they're stealing the equivalent of $1 trillion a year out of keeping us all divided and conflicting and fighting with one another, wouldn't they spend $500 billion or $800 billion of that on a psyop to keep us all from recognizing ourselves and fighting each other? And more importantly, for the English right now, the people, not so much Ireland because you broke away, but the United Kingdom, you got a king with a lot of powers if he has the people behind him, constitutional powers, prerogatives, etc. But he can't use them except in the utmost, and that means the people. So wouldn't they spend $500 billion a year on a psyop to keep everybody hating the king and thinking he's a pedophile or thinking he's a Muslim or any of these other things? I would.
Yeah, money well spent. And,
right?
Ireland, I mean, the Chinese went through a lot of tough times. And I'd say that helped with their overthrowing of the oppressor, if you will. Yeah. The Russians, needless to say, ditto. One little wrinkle or extra challenge I think we have in the West is we're soft as shite. I mean, what I described to you in Ireland, we've had it too good, too easy, and we've been psyop for too long to make this easy. An example is the Eastern Europeans, during COVID, almost none of them fell for the nonsense. And the native Irish lapped it up like mama's milk, right? It was such a clear difference. The Eastern Europeans had seen communism. They'd lived under kind of tyranny and totalitarianism. And when COVID came along and all the madness, and it was such absurd madness, I was nearly going insane looking at this. How can people go along with what's clearly, patently absurd? It's a bad flu. But people did because they're soft. So the Eastern Europeans, they went along to the point that they had to, defend themselves from losing jobs or ending up in trouble. They looked after themselves, but they didn't fall for it. I have a load of people I know, Eastern European and all. I used to quiz everyone. And no, load of bollocks. Bill Gates, load of crap. Hey, we lived through this in communism, 34. We're not doing it again. We're not playing ball. There was a big difference. So what's going to have to happen is the Irish people are going to have to re-find their identity and re-find their courage. I mean, we are living in the age of cowardice, quite frankly, just in the West. Talk about soft and weak and cowardly. And I don't mean to be negative, but, we got a job to do to get people just to be proper, upstanding human beings, like, have some pride.
Just on that, in the UK, or especially in London, or in areas where there were large populations of people from former colonies, there was very low take-up of that wonderful medical intervention.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
similar example.
India, the West Indies and stuff, very low take-up because they're distrusting of the former colonial masters. And that was certainly the case for me. Big Pharma tells me to take it, government tells me to take it, I ain't taking it, right?
No way.
And it's curious that Ireland, having been colonized by the same colonial masters for so long, from what you're saying and from my own observations of what was going on at the time, didn't have that suspicion. But it goes down to what you're saying, they've been suppressed for so long. But then I want to go
they've been
else.
Indoctrinated. It's indoctrination over decades.
They've been conquered by European estrogen.
Right, just on the European estrogen,
it's because the incentive structures, right? Who sets the incentive structures? The oldest families in Europe are all matrilineal. The oldest patrilineal, unbroken and non-adopted, is less than 200 years old. The matrilineal lines, there are families that are 1,000 years old unbroken. And there are 7 of those houses that are between 300 and 900 years unbroken. Those families set the incentive structures.
Okay,
yeah, and the incentive structures are what set everything.
Which leads on to the point that I was going to make about Irish matriarchs. From my own personal contact with many Irish friends living in London, and that Irish women, it seems to me, have held a particularly strong role within the Irish structure. Yeah. And then
estrogen colonized.
With all the crime that's going on, the sexual assaults against Irish women, isn't there an uprising of Irish mothers against?
No, you'd have to know. You'd have to know.
Genetic warfare. I don't even know. Warfare. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, sorry. I don't even know the numbers myself. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure of the numbers myself. England seems to have more major cases. Ireland's had a few stabbings from immigrants, and the media immediately worked to paper over it. The whole establishment works to absolutely minimize it, and it works. And then they start slinging far right and racist at anyone who starts asking questions. So in fairness, Ireland, they've got a good grip on Ireland, combined with the nature of the Irish I kind of described. They're holding it together. Now it's beginning to slide and slip, and that's the positive thing. But, you know, there was a recent incident, I'll just tell you really quickly, Misha era, meaning a kind of I am Ireland or me Ireland. There was a celebration, 200 tickets sold in the west of Ireland of Irish music and Irish history and all this kind of stuff. You'd say fantastic, right? Well, no, the people who organised it were the Irish Inquiry, kind of a real journalism outlet, very small, Stephen Kerr and some others. The system turned on them with such fury, it was hard to believe it was 200 people literally just having a celebration of Irish culture and music. They got 600 Irish artists and musicians and expat similar, most of them no marks, but they got 600 on a petition to stop this racist event, and they got it cancelled from the hotel. The good thing was, it got very public. The Irish diaspora in America picked up on it, to your earlier point, Ian. There was a lot of support. I pushed as hard as possible to help them. And they ended up with a new venue that, even though attacked viciously, did not back down. And they got 700 tickets at the max volume sold out. Now, more of that, please.
Yeah, so wonderful, wonderful. Mutual friend John Waters was involved in all that as well, right? Okay, so Rich, to your question, okay, the problem is that women set the incentive structures, and women are locked in relentless genetic warfare. This is class warfare, and these upper class women who have, or who are the ones who set the incentive structures by who gets what jobs and who gets to marry who and who has what status and status hierarchies, etc. They're locked in genetic warfare. They don't care if this happens. This is unbelievably happening in the United Kingdom, where status is everything. It's genetic warfare by women who have power. They don't care what happens to the lower class women. In fact, they're inviting these people, they're using the rapes of the lower class women as a bribe to bring in military-aged males, so that in the event that native sons rise up, there'll be these military-aged males who've been bribed with free housing and food and legal protections and the rape of our women to fight for these unhealthy matriarchs. It's an old pattern, right? And to your comment, right, we haven't gone through the hardship. That's absolutely true, right? Coddled. But there is another one historically we have. So we go back to our historical history, and not so very long ago for the Irish and others, right? We can remember that, bring that forward. But there's actually something that's very, very inimical to the English civilization, whether you're Irish, Scottish, Welsh, English, East Anglian, whatever the hell, South African, American, New Zealander, Australian, Canadian. I don't know about the Canadians. They're an odd duck, right? But down underneath, not so very deep, and in my own lifetime and not so long ago, we're all pub brawlers by nature.
Oh, the English football.
Right? It's not just, it's all of us, right? The Scots, the Irish, the Welsh, the Americans, the New Zealanders, and I know from my own time, I've been in a lot of those scuffles. I've had brain injuries from that, literal brain injuries from that stuff, right, that I've had to work on in my older life. So it's not so much the hooliganism, because that's unstructured, right? That's undirected, and that can cause more chaos and destruction and harm. But that pub brawler nature to the English civilization that we all share, it's right there. And it doesn't take much to come out. And here's the piece. When you're a pub brawler, you're not, as a male, you're not competing in women's status hierarchies anymore. You're competing in male status hierarchies. And that's what needs to happen, is the males have been trying to compete in this increasingly female status hierarchical system. Okay, well, there's one area that they can't compete with us. That's why they don't let women fight men, or men fight women in MMA, or boxing, or pretty much anything, right? There's one place that women have no part in the status hierarchy, and that's pub brawling. And most all of the great movements, the revolutions, the peasant movements, the calling the king to the carpet, the barons to the carpet, all of it started with pub brawlers who had some pints, probably threw down some fists arguing about loyalty to this and interpretation of that, etc. And then they finally realized, all right, lads, we got to go march on the big house, right?
Yes.
Well, that might explain why Bill Gates has done multiple studies trying to say that alcohol is absolutely terrible. And we know he doesn't give a damn about people's health. So I noticed, and I suspected, Dean, that alcohol, Ireland, they shut the pubs the longest in Europe. And I knew why. And it wasn't a conspiracy. It was obvious.
Oh,
The
you would
Irish
have gone
get
torn
pubs.
people down. Yes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but the Irish people, if they are able to go and talk in pubs, they're going to start saying, what's the story with this COVID thing?
Yeah.
So they made sure the Irish didn't go into pubs and talk about COVID.
Yes.
And likewise, alcohol.
Here
They
as
don't
well
like
in the US.
alcohol because people have a few and then they talk too plainly. And what you described,
Especially the
also,
Irish.
maybe. Especially the Irish and this English Irish,
Yes.
like you said,
Yes.
the English,
Yes.
the Irish.
Yes,
It's the
the
same
Scots, the
broad culture.
Welsh, the again, some of the
Aussies.
Canadian Americans, Australians, New Zealanders, South Africa, we're all the same. We're runners and brawlers down underneath. And what's common to all that? Alcohol, and particularly
Often, yes.
whiskey,
And
a good
you
whiskey.
know, look what they
right?
did to Australia. Australia, 25 years ago, a friend of mine, I think, went to Australia and he got checked for drink driving 3 times in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
And I was astonished. And then I slowly found out that Australia, 20 years ago, is an utterly dominated, rules-based society.
Yes.
And people have eventually
it's an estrogen
accepted
society. Yeah.
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 But I thought, well, hold on, Australia, Crocodile Dundee, Tills, crazy shit. No, maybe out in the backwoods. But Australia 20 years ago was being turned into a completely emasculated society. So now I thought that was just something that organically happened for some weird reason. And now I know better.
Now you know better. Ivor, listen, we're going to have to finish up soon, right? Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we should have finished up with a drink.
And I actually have my own homebrewed ale. I bought a brewing machine from Bevor.
There you go.
So I get bags of grain, and it's true brewing from bags of grain. So think about that. Here we can have another chat in a while, Rich. Just pull another.
That would be great. That would be great. The one thing that you and I have not explored is I'd love to explore with you is this whole notion of estrogens.
Oh gosh.
And I have to confess, right, that I think that I have certainly been infected by that pro-estrogen ideology.
Yes.
I'm a bloody social worker.
Yes.
Right? If there isn't, that's a pretty estrogen sort of based career. And
yes and no. Because there's the father in there too, by the way. So
yes, I am a father.
Yeah.
There's just something in there that, I'd love to meet you both for a drink, but as a Muslim, mine's sparkling water. If that's
we'll have yours for you.
No, I don't even drink juice. It's sparkling water.
I'm half Scottish. Thought I was Irish, so I can do a couple
my wife's vodka. She'll join us and she'll have a.
You know, one thing, because I know I was sent by O'Reilly Media.
Yes, I know. I know. We know.
Yeah,
we know.
I know. I can't. I know. Brain fart.
Yeah.
But he sent me your guys' discussion. Now I only got a few minutes of it because I'm up the walls. But fascinating on the psychology of these people who are destroying our world. Let's not put too fine a point.
Because their world's destroyed. And their world's destroyed by the people around them to keep them in that state so they can be manipulated to do this stuff.
Yeah, but that whole discussion of the true heads of the snake, their psychology and their evil, because Dr. Jacob Nordengard, I remember Rockefeller, and I now know from this book, right? Dr. Nordengard went through the whole Rockefeller story, and it's fantastic. It's amazing. But now I see Rockefeller is just one cog in the machine, the banking machine.
He's hired help.
Yeah, but the psychology of all of these people, they really are sociopathic. They have no empathy. They are utterly obsessed with money and power. And because they can have endless money, it's not satisfying. They need to have dominion over their own species.
Here's what I say.
Dogs wouldn't be good enough.
Here's what I say. So first off, read the book, The Eternal War, because I go into all of that pretty deep.
Great.
Okay. But this is what I say. I forget the indelicateness, okay? All right. We should never allow people to rise to power who can't orgasm naturally. Because they're twisted.
There'll be a lot of twisted folks in there in power right now.
Okay, we really are going to have to finish up. Otherwise, my next guest is going to turn up in this conversation. I'm talking VPNs, decentralized VPNs with that person. So they're going to get their head twisted, like, what have I walked into, right? Our conversation, right? And just on that, the noises that I'm hearing is that stuff is going to come out about the worst things that adults do to children en masse. That is coming out.
It's coming.
Epstein is like pulling on a string on a ball of wool. Now, I need to tell myself to shut up. Thank you both, Ivor. Thank you, EM.
Pleasure.
In the description below. Love to do this again. And please share this video far and wide, all that business. And I stand, and I think we all stand, you can all stand with me in this, a world where human beings honor human beings. A world of honor.
You know who honors each other? Pub brawlers.
Thank you.
Yeah. honor and principle and courage.
Absolutely.
All that good.
Thank you.
Bye now, guys. Good luck in.